Alright guys, Jameson and Alex here. Today we're going to be talking about the Circle of the City Druid from Valda's Spire of Secrets.
Also known as the not Druid.
That's right. So, if you're new to the channel or the subclass series, what we're going to do is go through all the abilities gained in the subclass, then we're going to rate it based on its roleplay value, combat value, and overall class synergy, based on how the abilities gained in the subclass improve on the base class abilities.
That's right.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to be entered in our D&D Beyond Players Bundle giveaway.
Like giveaway free stuff.
And of course, thank you to our sponsors, Hit Point Press. Make sure you check out their Fable Makers cards. It's a way to add some mystery and intrigue, fortune telling, and omens into your campaigns.
And for your player, what about this random little purse we happened to walk into this one time? You're like, but this? And you're like,
but omen!
That's cool, let's do that.
Awesome stuff from them. Link down below. Check it out. Really appreciate it. All that being said, Alex, abilities. What do we get?
Again, we are the not Druid. That's going to come out quick, fast, and in a hurry with Urban Arcana. Your Druid spells lose the aesthetic trappings of nature and instead appear inspired by the jungles of buildings, columns, and cobblestones. For example, entangle and spike growth might cause growths of metal wires and twisting pipes as opposed to vines and other things like that. Bark Scrim might grant you the appearance of like pitted iron or brick, something like that. You know, cool, very cool flavor things essentially that way. But you can also wear armor and wield shields made of metal, which by definition Druids normally can't do.
Correct.
Also at level 2, we have Street Talk. You have advantage on investigation checks to gather rumors or find a creature or location within an urban environment. Very cool. Feels very, roguey almost, and knowing the Undercity. Oh, wait, you learned Thieves Can't. That's why roguey. I thought it sounded kind of roguey. A secret mix of dialect, jargon, and code that allows you to hide messages in seemingly normal conversation. Only another creature that knows Thieves Can't understand such messages. It takes 4 times longer to convey such a message than it does to speak the same idea plainly.
There you go. And then where things start getting really interesting,
the whole thing's based around.
Level 2, as an action, you can expend a use of your Wild Shape feature to warp the city around you. Choose one of the following effects. Yes, you have multiple options. First is Cobble Shift. You magically manipulate the components of a constructed floor. Bricks, cobblestone, planks, and similar objects within 60 feet. Each component can move up to 1 foot and doesn't cause instabilities in their structures.
Which is fascinating.
Yes. When you use this effect, you can cause any sections of floor that you choose within the area to become difficult terrain, and can cause any creature standing in one of those sections to make a dex save against your spell save DC or fall prone. You are unaffected by the difficult terrain. Additionally, you can use your action on each of your turns to raise up to 3 low walls from the floor, each 2.5 feet high, 5 feet wide, and 1 foot deep. Such a wall can generally provide half cover for a medium creature. These walls provide no instability in surrounding structures. This ability lasts for 1 minute. After this time, all components and walls magically revert to their original positions. So you, in layman's terms, you do some shenanigans.
Yep.
But that's only the first option. Second option is Pass Wall. You can cast the spell Pass Wall without expending a spell slot or material components. All right. Nice to have that option on there.
Yep.
And then lastly, we have Wall Warp. A wall that you can see within 30 feet magically shifts, grows, shrinks, or rotates. This wall must be a continuous surface without corners, at most 1 foot thick, and must be either made out of wood, plaster, or stone, or not be naturally occurring. The wall must remain vertical, but you can move it in any position you choose within 60-foot radius of its previous position. Its new position can't include spaces occupied by creatures or objects. If you cause the wall to grow or shrink, you can only change its dimensions vertically. These changes to the wall create no instabilities in the structures. After 1 minute, the wall reverts to its original size and position. So, you move walls, or you move floors.
Yep.
You moving stuff around.
Walls, floors, and doors.
There you go.
And just as a quick reminder, the Pass Wall spell itself, not one you probably would cast normally, but you can do it for free, kind of free, not without a spell slot, essentially. It is a level 5 spell, 1 action, duration of an hour, because it's affecting the terrain and whatnot. Range of 30 feet, and it's a control spell, obviously. Transmutation, School of Magic. A passage appears at a point of your choice, as you can see on a wooden, plaster, or stone surface, wall, ceiling, floor, within range. And last, the duration. You choose the opening's dimensions up to 5 feet wide, 8 feet tall, and 20 feet deep. The passage creates no instability in the structure surrounding it, again, fitting with the subclass very well. When the opening disappears, any creatures or objects still in the passage created by the spell are safely ejected to an occupied space nearest to the surface when you cast the spell. So again, just leaning hard into what this thing does of manipulating things around you.
Absolutely.
Also at level 6, we get Whispers of Walls. The walls speak to you in a quiet tremor. You can use your action to touch a constructed part of the building, such as a wall, pillar, ceiling, or floor. You learn how many humanoid creatures, and specifies humanoid, are within the building and how many are within each room, which is amazing. Yeah. What a great scouting ability. If there are more than 50 humanoids in a building, you can only detect the closest 50. So if it's 64 in there, you're going to detect 50.
Level 10, Breath of Smog. You can exhale a 10-foot radius sphere of toxic smoke centered on yourself. As a reaction when you take damage, the area is heavily obscured. If a creature other than you is completely within the smog at the start of its turn, it must make a Constitution saving throw against your spell save DC or be poisoned until the start of its next turn as it coughs uncontrollably. The smog dissipates after 1 minute. A moderate wind, at least 10 miles an hour, disperses the cloud after 4 rounds. A strong wind, at least 20 miles per hour, disperses it after 1 round. Once you use this ability, you can't use it again until you use your city shape feature or you finish a short or long rest. So if you really wanted to add a bunch of heavily obscured area, you could just burn some wild shape, move some walls around, and make some shenanigans.
Yep. And finally, at 14, we have Twisting Architecture. You command total mastery of the city's architecture, warping it to any shape you might imagine. You can spend 2 uses of your wild shape feature to activate any and all effects. All 3 of them of your city shape ability at one time. Additionally, when you use your city shape feature, you can warp the gravity. Mm-hmm. This whole subclass just says, screw you, laws of physics and architecture and math and everything else. It's like, no, It's a 60-foot radius. For the next minute, creatures and objects within 15 feet of one of these surfaces fall toward it as if it were the ground. A creature can walk on the surface if it were level ground, even if the surface is perpendicular to the ground or upside down. At the end of this duration, all creatures and objects fall from the affected surfaces.
Yes, so some major shenanigans to be had.
I just imagine, like, you flip the gravity, like, you create a room.
Spiraling.
Flip it, essentially, so, like, the ceiling is the roof.
Oh, yeah. Maybe some...
It's the ceiling's the roof. I made a bad Michael Jordan quote.
I just picture, like, Inception
ceiling's the floor.
Doctor Strange or Inception and stuff just...
So you could literally just stick somebody up there, and if they can't... If they can just run across the ceiling.
Right.
And then you're just start shooting them from the ground. It's like if they can't get to you, and all they can do is like
pulling them you could
do some really awful things with this.
Speaking of really awful things, we'll move on to the rating portion of the video. First up is roleplay value. When we're talking about roleplay value, asterisk as always, talking about interacting with the world around you, interacting with NPCs, non-combat scenarios, avoiding combat, basically things outside the initiative order. Not talking about your class fantasy, history, lore, background, that's on you as a player. We can't rate you, but we can rate the abilities gained in the subclass and how they might improve your potential in those role play scenarios.
That's right.
So, all that being said, there are some very interesting things going on with this
Just shenanigans.
So, the biggest thing on here is, obviously, the wild shape. So,
yeah,
let's get straight into that.
Just Doctor Strange this whole thing.
Yes, it's like Doctor Strange or like Inception, some crazy shenanigans
just
going on
flipping buildings in on themselves.
So, with that, as we bring up a lot of times on here, wild shape, if you're not a moon druid, really falls off pretty quickly because the creatures you're turning into don't really scale very well unless you are a moon druid.
They're strictly going to be only like for RP exploration, scouting, right? But the only things you're going to be able to do with your
There are
wild
some
shape.
other subclasses as well that kind of touch on this, like Spores Druid gives you some alternative options for wild shape, which we are big fans of because we feel like the innate wild shape really does fall off. So getting another opportunity to get a different use out of wild shape.
Man, is it a use.
And yes, this is absolutely
technically ridiculous. 3 of them again.
Exactly. So you have some really major things that can be done with this, especially in urban environments, because that's your specialty. But at the same time, it's in urban environments. So if you're not in an urban environment, you're not going to have that alternative approach.
That's right.
So that is something you have to keep in mind for sure. The bonus to city investigation is nice as well, but it is limited. And the Thieves' Cant is nice, but again, it's nothing crazy outside of the normal.
Right. Somebody else has to have that for you to be able to use it.
And I think one of the other big things on here is, as Alex was kind of saying, whispers of walls is just huge scouting. To just know where stuff is in a building.
Yep. No head count. You're like, if you're trying to go in there, like we're trying to be as stealthy as we can to get into this place.
Right. And if you're like, there's people inside to the right.
Yeah.
You know,
there's 38 people
that
in
are
these 16 rooms.
Right. So just avoid that. Yeah, so you can do some really crazy stuff, and that is huge. Biggest issue on here is it's very specialized, which is great when you're in that circumstance, but when you're not in the circumstance, you don't really have a whole lot going on.
Yep.
But that being said, it is very potent in the urban environment. So we went with a 4 out of 5 in the role play department.
Yes, because essentially it's like if it's when you're in the city and once your stuff comes online, probably really a 5. But you're not going to be in the city all the time.
If the campaign
in most campaigns, if you're in like an urban like Waterdeep, someplace like that, you'd probably be like a 6.5 out of 5 on what you can do would be silly.
Absolutely.
On the combat side of things, again, some of this stuff does roll over. Again, like your wild shape, able to move structures. You can create cover. It does specify half cover for medium creatures, which almost all races are medium and smaller. You can play with structures, creates cover, things you can hide behind, manipulate line of sight and stuff. So even if it's not traditional combat, maybe, it does give you options. The other thing I didn't want to, kind of did pass over, I didn't really mean to, is the option to wear armor and wield shields made of metal. That just lifts a restriction that normally druids have. So as you're leveling up and you come across armor that would be normally good for you in general, but you couldn't wear as a druid.
Right.
Now you can.
Yes. So, and that there is some lenience there with how strict the DM is on helping you keep that that restriction.
Normally, yes. Of course, the Whisper of the Walls things is primarily an RP thing. Now it can affect combat because it's giving you information. It kind of helps with combat, scouting ahead of time because you know whether it's like, oh, we were told there's going to be like a small garrison of like 10 to 15 guys. I know there's at least 150 in here. We're not going to go in here. It could save you a combat essentially that way, which kind of falls under the RP of our definition, but you know what I mean.
Right.
You're getting information that could help you with combat. With the smog thing, there's twofold the chance to poison something, which is good because it's going to affect their combat effectiveness.
Right.
And also the heavily obscured area. That is really the bigger part of this.
Yeah, that is the underdog of this ability.
It prevents stuff from being able to hit you if you're inside the area. So you can kind of wall off certain things, or if you want to put
between
something...
walls and heavily obscured, there's going to be very poor visibility. It's going to be very difficult to be hit.
You are the absolute master of your domain and controlling the way things are laid out, which is so very druid, which we're going to come into the synergy side of things. And finally, the twisting architecture thing, basically letting you do all 3 pieces of your wild shape essentially for the cost of 2. So you can even do the pass wall part and create an extra tunnel, through some of that extra terrain you've manipulated that only you would know is there, or your party's going to know there, that who you're fighting may not know is there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when with a possible 3 of a possible 5 on the combat side of things, because again, it goes into, if you're in the city, you're going to do a lot of fun things. But you're not getting a ton of extra, not really any extra damage on your combat side of things. You're just doing a higher variety of battlefield manipulation than what base druid already gets, with the chance to poison and throw some obscurity in there. So it just lets you play around and be a druid in a very unique way.
Right. And I think another limitation heavily on this one is your uses of wild shape. You only get 2 per short rest.
Yep.
So you're only going to be able to do this so often.
Yep.
And if you use your twisting architecture, it uses both of your
you're
wild
done.
shape.
You're done for that rest.
You're done for a rest. So it will be very impactful when it does hit, but you are pretty limited on your abilities on here, and a lot of the subclass is built around that ability, which is very limited. So that's something you have to keep in mind as well. And then moving on to the synergy side of things, as I mentioned earlier, it is really good to always have a variety of options for your wild shape. This is especially potent, especially in urban environments. It just is absolutely ridiculous. The limitation is your small number of uses that can be done with this, especially if you do want to do the twisting and turning of all the shenanigans on there. And I think really just the biggest thing with this subclass is it's going to be a medium low floor and a incredibly high ceiling, because if you are very quick on your feet,
Yep.
a very clever player. You can make a lot of shenanigans. You can completely negate or avoid combats. You move a wall, you block your vision, you put a pass wall tunnel. You can pretty much get out of any urban environment. Like you can escape or bypass things very easily. You can completely flip encounters upside down.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think, like, you put this with a rogue and then like some ranger, you're just a 3-man scouting party that can do whatever the fart they want to do.
Yeah, it's going to be... There's a lot of potential on here. But if you are not super quick on your feet, not a very,
Abstract thinker.
Yes. You're not going to be very impactful.
Because you're essentially playing 3D chess in your head.
Right.
Because you have nothing like physical to look at, like to kind of wrap this here. I mean, if you're playing with maps, obviously in person, great. That's a better way to play, in my opinion. You're going to have something, but you're not able to physically play.
There's only so much you can move on a map, especially if you're playing like virtual tabletop kind of thing.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm gonna flip this wall and flip this thing upside down. It's like
even if you're
DM
playing
is
with,
like trying to keep track of all this stuff, like spinning around.
Even if you're playing with like actual physical structures and things on there, like, oh, I want to take this wall, move it out 8 feet, shrink it down 1.5 feet, and then bring in these 2 walls and raise them up, and then we're gonna flip the whole thing on its head.
Right.
Your team's like, wait, look, hold on.
So there's a lot of craziness that can be done, but you gotta be
Yep.
You got to be on your toes.
You got to be quick. You got to be sharp. But again, if you are a very creative player, you can have an absolute blast with this.
Oh, for sure.
Because I told him right before we started shooting this, I was like, could you imagine you create a little like 3-walled structure, then you go like wall of fire on the top of it.
Oh yeah.
Then you flip the gravity in there.
Don't forget you have spells that you can.
Yeah, because you full caster.
You have all of your utility spells that go on top.
You flip the gravity and something is literally standing in the wall of fire on the roof inside a building, and they can't. And all they can do is walk this way in the fire. They're just going to stand in there because of gravity.
Yeah. So there are some crazy combos and things that can be done.
Lock something in a firebox.
All that being said. We gave it a 3 on the synergy. Yeah. But I would say 3 is the floor for combat and synergy. If you're creative, you could have the scores could be substantially higher. If you if you're really creative, you can make the DM's life a nightmare.
Yeah.
Or with the amount of shenanigans that you can do.
Problem
in urban environments.
Yeah. But therein lies the problem. We wanted to make sure we stress just one last time: is if you're in a very rural campaign, very exploration based, and you're on the ocean a lot, like a lot of travel based stuff. Like you're gonna have to like beg your DM for like to find some some structures at least that you could play with, like some ruins and things.
Right, and that's part of it. We kind of tried to factor that in a little bit because when it's so specific to a very specific environment, we have to look at in broad sense of most campaigns. You're going to go to towns here and there. You're not going to spend the entire campaign in a town.
That's right.
But there are campaigns that do take place, and in that circumstance, take those scores and add some to it because you're going to have a huge impact in urban environments. But yeah, very interesting take on the Druid in our opinion.
Yep.
A lot of fun if you're very creative.
Yeah.
So lots of stuff can be done with this one. That's it for today, guys. If you enjoyed the video, remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications to know when our new videos are coming out. Thanks again to our sponsors, Hit Point Press.
Yes.
Check out that Fable Maker stuff. Awesome stuff from them. Helps us out. Really appreciate it when you guys support us. And as always, thanks for watching.